Over the last few days, things have been getting interesting across parts of the main development region and the east coast of the United States. According to several of the ensemble models, we're seeing an increasing signal of tropical development in both of these regions, and areas according to these ensembles might want to start paying attention. But how legitimate are these signals? Despite the power according to the European with one of the signals, particularly in the main development region, how legitimate is this? Is there any cross-reference to the operational models? What are the conditions going to be like? In today's video, we're going to be dissecting everything that you need to know. Let's dive right into this. So, here's what we have for you guys right here. A lot of the ensembles, particularly the European AI and the European ensembles, are picking up on a couple of areas off the East Coast and in the main development region that I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be showing you those ensembles as well as the GFS and all the other ensembles that are showing this as well. And then we're going to be cross-checking this and going, okay, what are the conditions like? What are the operationals doing? And go from there. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into this. So starting off, here is the European AI run that we have pulled up for you. We have the main development region. In fact, we have the entire Atlantic showed for you guys here today. We're going to keep it on this right here because there's a couple of areas and we can kind of dissect them both simultaneously. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and start 24 hours out. And what we have right here, not too much is going on. You have a tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa, not showing too much over here. And then as we look over here off the east coast, you have another weak low pressure system. This to me is telling me that this is going to be more so a mid-latitude based cyclone instead of a tropical cyclone right here. So I'm not necessarily paying too much attention to it as of right now. Going to 48 hours out, that expands further to the east, shifts away from Massachusetts and New England over here. And then as we get to 72 hours out is when things start to get cooking a little bit. So what we're looking at over here, our first little ensemble, around 10-11 millibars, comes off the coast of Africa. I believe this is from another tropical wave that's expected to originate from this region, from the Sahel region, right over here. So definitely something to kind of keep a close eye on, especially as we go to the next day. Well, not too much is going on 96 hours out. You have a couple ensembles popping up here and there. But then as we go ahead and get to 5 days out, this is when things start getting a little interesting. I was a day off, my apologies. But you are starting to see something starting to potentially get its act together. You're noticing a pretty consistent signal starting to pop up south and southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands over here, around 10-10, 10-11, 10-12 millibars. So your overall generally rather weak system at this current point in time, slowly trying to get its act together, trying to organize and potentially consolidate as we get down the line. Let's go ahead and go to 144 hours out. By the time we get to that, this is 6 days out, so this will be for the 10th of August. This system becomes a bit more concentrated and a bit more consolidated as we get towards the central part of the MDR according to the Euro AI. Definitely things are starting to get a bit more cooking over here. Also watching this area over here off the east coast of the United States, nearly in North Carolina and Virginia. Over here, paying attention to that. That to me is something that's going to be a little interesting. Not 100% sure if this is going to be mid-latitude or subtropical or not, but definitely something to watch out for as it emerges off the east coast of the US. Also watching this business over here around the Gulf, I'm not really too worried about it. I haven't seen any of the other models kind of been acting on it. This to me just seems more like noise than anything else to me. And then as we go ahead and shift over, we're going to go ahead and go 24 hours out. So this is 7 days out by August 11th. What you're starting to notice here is this area starts to become a bit more consolidated and a bit more concentrated in terms of its potential development. And you're noticing you're starting to see a little bit more power, about 1,007, 1,009 or so, 1,006 millibars, potentially getting up to tropical storm strength, at least weak tropical storm strength by the time we get to this point. And the run right here, and then as we go another 24 hours out, look at how much more this grows right here. Look at how fast this signal grows. You're seeing a lot more ensembles really picking up in the main development region according to the European AI run, and you're also noticing some more of these scenarios starting to dip into that tropical depression to weak tropical storm scenario as the system moves through the western MDR and heads either towards the Caribbean or the Atlantic basin over here. And then as we go ahead and go to 9 days out, majority of this signal right here does start to move into the Caribbean. It starts to move south of Puerto Rico and through the Leeward Islands over here, although you are starting to notice as well about tropical storm strength is what I am generally noticing here. Not necessarily the strongest signal in the world, mainly due to some of the conditions that we'll be going into in a little bit, but definitely things are getting interesting. And then as we go ahead and get to 10 days out, so this is the 14th of August, definitely noticing a bit of a split over here. Noticing a few of the ensembles starting to shift a bit further up to the north towards parts of the Bahamas, towards parts of the east coast of the United States. Majority of them do keep it in the Caribbean right here, which if that's the case, we're going to want to watch out for that wind shear that's kind of persisting over there. And I want to see what the forecast is looking like over there. Now let's go ahead and go out to another 48 hours out. Let's go ahead and go to 12 days out. A lot of the ensembles kind of have this moving through the Caribbean and not really lasting too long past the Dominican Republic or Haiti, primarily due to the fact that you're seeing all that wind shear and mainly due to the fact that it's El Nino over there as well. But you do see that split with a couple of these ensembles shifting further up to the north towards the Bahamas, towards Florida as well. So definitely an intriguing situation that we're going to want to watch out for. That's kind of the European AI run that we're watching out for. And I also want to show the Europeans ensembles as well, because this is also going to be interesting because the European is also picking up on this, and they are increasing a bit the power on this a little bit as well. So let's go ahead and start off with this. Let's go ahead and go to 5 days out to show you what's going on. So starting 5 days out, what you're noticing over here, that signal starting to pick up just a slight amount over here off the Cabo Verde Islands, just a bit further to the south of there. Let's go ahead and shift over to 144 hours out. That's 6 days out, so that's the 10th. Noticing that signal, not necessarily that many ensembles on this, but the ensembles that are showing up are showing quite a bit of power with this. So this looks to me like it's more of a power signal than it is more of a ensemble signal. So it's definitely an intriguing situation. And then as we go ahead and go another 24 hours out, here is what we got. A lot of the ensembles that are showing this are showing at least strong tropical storm, maybe weak hurricane scenarios with this right here. Not necessarily too many ensembles. I think there's like 5 ensembles of the 30 ensemble suite over here, but by and large, the ensembles that are showing it definitely are showing quite a bit of pop associated with it. Then as we go ahead and go to about 8 days out, so this will be August 12th, you are noticing a few more ensembles picking up on it as well as the system moves through the main development region and starts to head towards either the Caribbean or the Atlantic Basin, and I'll show you that split in just a second. Here is what we have 9 days out. Definitely noticing a couple of things that are intriguing right here. Number one, you're noticing a lot more of the ensemble starting to pick up a lot more activity potential in the main development region. Not necessarily strong activity, more so weak activity, but you are noticing those ensembles picking up that as well. Part of that is due to tropical waves. Part of that is because the waves are getting stronger as we get towards the middle part of August, and especially as we get towards the later part of August. But the main area I am focusing on for today is this area right here in the western MDR. You're noticing more signals starting to show up, and you are noticing a little bit of intrigue with this because I'm noticing this, the stronger the signal gets, the further up to the north that it's ultimately going to go, partly due to the weaker than expected Bermuda high thanks to the El Nino that is impacting the Atlantic. And then as we go ahead and head towards 10 days out, you're seeing a lot of these ensembles moving towards the Caribbean, mainly starting to weaken primarily due to wind shear as it starts moving into the Caribbean graveyard over here. And then as we go ahead and go another 48 hours out as well, things start to get a little more interesting. You're noticing a little bit of a split with the models right here with the ensembles. You're noticing the stronger signals starting to get yanked further up to the north around the Hispaniola region, around Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and some of the weaker runs are heading into the southern parts of the Caribbean, potentially towards Central America. Keep in mind, this is 12 days out. We're not 100% sure if this is even going to develop. I'm just running through the possible scenarios at this current point. And then as we go ahead and show you this is what we have 13 days out. The ensembles that are still there definitely show quite a bit of power with it, But as we go ahead and go to 15 days out, there's not really that many European ensembles. It's still an interesting signal right there, but it's more so a power signal than it is an actual signal, in my opinion. It's something we're going to want to watch out for, and it's definitely something that's really piqued my interest, especially with the European AI screaming the huge amount of ensembles it's starting to spit out. But the question I have now is, how legitimate is this signal? What is the realistic scenario behind this? Is anything going to develop at all? And if it does develop, how strong will it be? Well, we can go ahead and answer that question for you right now. Let's go ahead and go back, and we're going to go ahead and go to the GFS ensembles right here. The GFS is showing something a little bit over here and a little bit off the East Coast as well. This is mainly more mid-latitude to subtropical over here. I'm not too worried about that per se. The GFS is showing maybe a little bit of something here, but it is relatively weak, and there's not too many ensembles picking up on it at this current point. Let's go ahead and go to 6 days out. You are noticing a little bit of a signal right here around a 10-13 millibar system, but by the time we get to 9 days out, let's show you this. You are noticing some noise over here according to the GFS, but the GFS's signal remains relatively weak, and I just want to check for context. What was the 12Z run last night showing? It was actually a bit of an uptick compared to what we saw with the 12Z. The 0Z is definitely showing a little bit more activity over here compared to what we've seen yesterday. So it's something to maybe monitor, but I'm not necessarily too worried about it just yet. I want to wait and see how this is going to react in, say, the next couple of days. If we keep seeing these ensembles starting to uptrend, I'll be paying more attention to it. If it remains about the same, I won't be paying as much attention to it, although it is something I do want to watch just for my own interest and my own sake. So that's what we have with the GFS ensembles. Here is the Google DeepMind for you guys right here. The Google DeepMind, let's just go ahead and go to 15 days out and show you this. It's showing not really that big of a signal. About 3 ensembles of their suite is showing anything happening out of the MDR, mainly more so focused on maybe a bit of a sleeper development area in the Gulf region, which I'm not 100% convinced on, or off the East Coast of the United States, as I was mentioning before. But overall, not too big of a signal according to the DeepMind. Here's the GENC. Similar situation, maybe a sleeper development area in the Gulf. It is showing a little bit of something going on in the MDR, but overall, I'm not too concerned about that if you just pay attention to the AI runs. Now the main question is, okay, we've seen all these ensembles. Are the operational runs even showing anything at this current point? The answer to that is most likely no, and we can show you the European because this is the most egregious area. We'll show you the European and the European AI run to kind of cross-check this reference. So here is your European operational right here. This is what we got for you guys going forward. As we start getting to about 5 days out, let's go ahead and pull this up and let's go ahead and show you what's going on. Let's go ahead and pause about 5 days out. This is where our little signal is forecast to start organizing and developing. It's this mass of convection over here that's kind of developing and attached to the intertropical convergence zone in the MDR. Definitely something interesting to keep an eye on, but overall, the European's not really showing too much right here. Maybe a little bit of organization as it heads towards the Caribbean, but overall, it's not really showing that much, and when we get to the conditions, we can kind of show you why that's the case. But by and large, the European's operational run isn't really showing too much. Let's go ahead and take a quick gander at the European AI just to kind of cross-check this. Here's the APHIS that we have pulled up for you. Let's see if the APHIS operational is showing, because the APHIS's ensembles are definitely picking up on something. I just want to see if the operationals are starting to catch up, and the Europeans absolutely hasn't from what I've seen. Here's what we have with the Euro AI. It is showing a little bit of a low pressure system off the Cabo Verde Islands over here by the time we get to about August 13th, but overall it remains relatively weak. Although you might want to pay attention to this right here, at least according to the AI run, maybe something a little organized happens, but it's not really showing too much, and the operationals aren't really starting to catch up just yet. So overall, you have your ensemble saying, hey, maybe something might be going down. The operationals are like, slow down, let's wait a little bit. So that's kind of where I'm at with this at this current point. But I do want to see what the conditions are like, because from my mind, the operationals are going, okay, we're definitely seeing something out here, but how legitimate is this going to be, and what are the conditions? Because we all know this, models are one thing, but real-time conditions are a whole other ballpark for you guys. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start off. Here is our water temperature for you guys right here. Based on everything I've seen right here, you're looking at your water temperatures, you are plenty warm for tropical development if you just take these at face value. We're going to be going over everything, just want to preface that I'm just looking at one condition at a time. But here's what we have with your water temperature. You're looking at about 27 to 28 degrees Celsius across much of the main development region, with the water temperatures only getting warmer and warmer as you either approach the Caribbean or the Atlantic Basin over here near the Bahamas. You're looking at 28 to 29 degrees Celsius by the time you get to that point, which is about 82 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who do not use the metric system. But overall, your water temperatures are plenty warm for tropical development. Either way this goes, if it enters the Caribbean, it's in 28 degrees Celsius. If it's in the Atlantic Basin, it's in 29 degrees Celsius waters. But overall, based on what I've seen from this, if you want a better shot at any tropical development, the system needs to head towards the Atlantic Basin just based on water temperatures alone, because you have more warmth to deal with, you have a bigger area of 29 degrees Celsius, and you have more potential energy for this system to kind of tap into, especially as we look at our ocean heat content. Here is our OHC. Across much of the main development region, not necessarily seeing too much, around 25 OHC, at least in the eastern part of the MDR, but as you shift further and further to the west, those OHC values do start to increase to around 50 to 75 as you approach the Caribbean. If you do get into the Caribbean, you are looking at around your 100 areas of OHC right here, your 100 mark at that current point. So overall, based on ocean heat content, there's definitely more warm water that is deep, but overall across the Atlantic Basin, that's kind of your area that you'd want to go into, and I'll talk about why in just a second. But overall, what you're looking at in the Atlantic Basin is anywhere from about 75 to 100 OHC, and that alone is already pretty decent for some good strengthening and some good development if you want anything to really develop from this signal in the MDR. So you looked at your water temperature, you looked at your OHC, what's the wind shear going to look like, and what's the Sahara air going to do? And for that, we're going to go ahead and pull up our trusty dusty European. We're going to go ahead and go back to the 0Z since this can go a bit further out. And we're going to go ahead and show you the 200 to 850 millibar wind shear. So this is what we have across much of the Atlantic right now. This is why, if anything develops and heads towards the Caribbean, you're not going to see it shift that far into the Central Caribbean. You're seeing this pocket of wind shear that has still been very stubborn across this area due to the fact of the strengthening trade winds from the El Nino. But as we start to look through this, as we go ahead and show you what we're seeing across the MDR, you are seeing a pretty interesting wind shear pocket developing a bit further to the west. And then as we start to go ahead and get to 72 hours out when this tropical wave emerges off the coast of Africa, you have relatively low wind shear across the board, across much of the main development region. By the time we get to August 7th, the evening of August 7th, you have very low wind shear across much of the region right here. And the wind shear that does exist is north of the Cabo Verde Islands, so it's definitely an intriguing situation. But by the time we get to 5 days out, by the time we get to the evening of August 8th, the wind shear across much of this region completely collapses, and this right here is opening the door for some potential tropical development. We're going to check the dry air in a second to cross-reference, but overall, this is the reason, in my opinion, the ensembles, especially the European AI, have been screaming at some potential tropical development, and it's been screaming for quite a few days, actually, as a matter of fact. But overall, looking at this, the wind shear across much of the MDR remains relatively weak. You do start seeing some building back further to the east and shifting a bit to the south as we get later into the run. But by and large, as time continues to progress, you do start seeing an increase of wind shear over here. So what's going to have to happen is, if the system wants to get its act together, its most likely shot of it doing it is most likely going to be between August 7th and August 11th for it to fully develop. And if it wants to continue progressing and it wants to continue to develop, it's going to have to probably move further up to the north in the Atlantic Basin. Going to have to battle this wind shear as it shifts further up to the north. But as it gets to the Atlantic Basin, definitely better shear conditions, at least initially, until we get to the Caribbean. Because the Caribbean, there is still a lot of shear that this system's going to be battling. A good 20 to 30 knots right there. Even though it does weaken, you're still looking at like I said before, 25, 30, even 35 knots of wind shear across the entire basin over here. Whereas if you go further up to the north in the Atlantic Basin, yeah, you have some pockets of wind shear, but it's generally a lot more favorable for tropical development based on what I'm seeing. So it's definitely something that we're going to want to pay attention to. Anything that gets into the Caribbean is not going to have a good time of getting its act together. But if it moves further up to the north and it starts impacting areas like the Bahamas or threatening areas like the East Coast over here, not saying that it will, but I am just talking about this. I'm talking about possible scenarios. It's going to have better conditions instead of just going into the Caribbean at that current point. So that's your wind shear. But initially, your wind shear looks pretty good for tropical development across the board in the main development region and in the Atlantic Basin. You do have some wind shear struggles later down the line by the time we get to about 9 days out. So that would be around August 12th, August 13th. But if the system can move into the Atlantic Basin and into the lower shear, it's going to have a scenario where it's going to have a better time at organizing and a potentially better time at strengthening as well. That's just based on wind shear alone on top of the water temperatures that we're dealing with. So across the board, 3 of the 4 conditions are definitely favoring the Atlantic Basin over the Caribbean. What's our dry air aspect? And this is the answer for you guys. Still dealing with a lot of dry air across much of the main development region. Let's go ahead and go out to about 72 hours to see how that progresses. So here's what we got about 72 hours out as this loads in. You have another moisture pocket that emerges from that tropical wave moving into parts of the main development region. You still have a lot of dry air further up to the north, but if the system can stay in this moisture pocket and kind of battle this dry air that's currently persisting over here, especially as we get to 5 days out, it's going to have an easier time of getting its act together. You still have some of that dry air moving further up to the west over here, and I would say by the time the system starts to get towards the Caribbean and the western main development region, if it does develop at all, you're going to have a scenario where it's going to be battling more dry air. But overall, your Sahara air layer is mainly going to be the main thing that kind of goes, okay, if this develops, it's going to be battling some of those dry air conditions. It's definitely something to pay attention to for the long run. And you are noticing, though, some dry air kind of moving in behind it. So based on what I've seen right here, you have a situation where it's kind of mixed. You have good shear, you have plenty of warm water, you have plenty of OHC, but the dry air is kind of mixed. It's not necessarily as overbearing as what we saw earlier in the season, but you are seeing a scenario where the dry air could cause some problems down the line. Early on, if the system stays in that moisture pocket, gets its act together in there, it shouldn't have too many problems, especially with the wind shear that is dealing with, well, should I say lack thereof of wind shear of dealing with. And that also will prevent dry air entrainments, but you're going to want to watch it down the line as it heads towards the Caribbean, as it heads towards the western main development region. The key is if it stays in this pocket of moisture, it doesn't deviate out of that, or it starts producing a lot of its convection and moving through some of that wind shear as we get towards the Atlantic Basin and as we get towards parts of the eastern Caribbean over here. It's going to be a scenario where that's going to be your wild card. I would say the dry air is definitely going to be your wild card based on what I've seen from everything right here. We're going to want to watch the trends. We're going to want to see how this will progress. Just for my own curiosity, what was the dry air looking like about 12 hours ago? Let's go ahead and take a quick gander at this. Definitely a bit more expansive. I want to go ahead and go to 72 hours out from this just to kind of see what those trends have been looking like. So 12 hours ago, according to the European, definitely a bit overbearing over here. What are we looking at now at 0Z? Definitely seeing not too much of a shift, a bit further to the south as well. So we'll have to watch those trends. Still the wild card. We'll keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. Feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.